we'd like to start with an art burst, and do you want to just tell them about this?
Yes.
And I will say no more,
We couldn't decide who should introduce whom.
because we're both in it.
So we'll introduce each other, and I'll introduce him after he introduces us. So Sherry Valeska and I did the Sandglass puppetry training last summer together, and this is a small sampling of that 2-week intensive. Do you guys want to say something about the process?
Yes. We all brought articles that interested us, and then we were given guidelines of how we could create the actual piece. And some of those guidelines were how many lines we could take out of the article.
That there had to be a look back.
Do you remember what the other ones were?
Things
Those
like
are the two that
Yeah.
were very powerful. Looking back and then the actual text.
And then we made the show mostly after class, because we had instruction with Eric and Inez during the day, and then we worked on the piece and presented it once to each other, got some feedback, and then presented it one more time.
And everything was created to just last that week. So we've been holding on to this for a year. So you
gonna
know
see
what
what
time
remains.
does to cardboard and paper. So, yes, there we go. Yeah, you're ready. Enjoy. immigration crisis on the US border isn't just about money. Far from it. But it does force a critical question. Does the influx of unaccompanied alien children contribute more money to the US economy than it takes out? Boom or bust? The state is seeking $5 million in reimbursements for a decade of spending. The Senate is offering $2.7 billion and the House $1.5 million. Border operations cost $1.3 million a week. 1,000 National Guard troops reported price tag $12 million a month. 57 million undocumented children.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce Eric Bass and Roberto Salomon and John Potter to talk today about their collaboration, and I'll let them say more. Thank you for being here. We still have one more show of El Patico Feo at Hilltop at 3 o'clock, and then tonight Romeo and Juliet at NEYT at 8. Last chance. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, are we on?
So good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. As you heard, my name's John Potter. I'm the former arts editor of the Brattleboro Reformer, now the executive director of the Latches, and very pleased and honored to be asked by Sandglass to help facilitate these conversations. With me today is Eric Bass of Sandglass Theater and Roberto Salomon of Teatro Luis Poma of El Salvador. And we'll talk about their collaboration there, but to give you some context, El Salvador right now has been called the world's most homicidal country. They are averaging 30 murders a day, and to put that into some context, imagine our little state of Vermont experiencing 3 murders every day and how we would feel about that. That's the level of violence. 20 times more violent and deadly than the United States as a basis of population. As someone said, this country is bleeding and it urgently needs a tourniquet. And I don't know if Eric and Roberto consider themselves the tourniquet. We'll find that out, but we're here to talk about their collaboration in the context in which it occurred. So with that, why don't we start by talking about what piece you guys have been working on.
Okay. We've been working for a good number of years. Started my collaboration with Sandglass about 15 years ago. And we've always been talking about doing a project together in Salvador. And well, Eric and I are always talking about what plays can be done with mixing actors and puppets, and which ones can't, and why they can and why they can't. And we both like Nathan the Wise by Lessing, the 18th century German playwright, very much. And we finally decided that this was what we were going to go on. And we started putting this project together, which took us quite a while to do. And thanks to the association between Sandglass Theater and Teatro Lispoma with a lot of grants in between, we were able to do this project with actors over a period of a year and a half. And first it started with a workshop in which we invited 15 actors to participate. And it was a training program to be able to work puppets with actors and actors with puppets, the way we had designed the show to be. And then we directed it with the help of Ines, who did the puppets and contributed greatly to the training in how to deal with the puppets, how actors deal with puppets, and how puppets react. And after this period of training, which was about 3 weeks, we chose 7 actors out of the 15, and then started the rehearsal periods in another visit that Eric and Ines did to Salvador. And we staged this. We started staging this and then stopped for 6 months. 6 months about, yes. And then they came back to Salvador for the final period of rehearsal. During the 6 months period, we also continued the rehearsals. And then we just presented the show last month in El Salvador. And the effect has been very, very positive, and it's been very well received. And it's a play that talks basically at the onset about religious tolerance, but it talks about a lot more things that have to do with El Salvador, and that really touched the audience, and really felt like we were talking about what is happening also in El Salvador with the intolerance and the murder rate and whatnot. But other than that, it's still a beautiful country, and our Blue Lake has just turned turquoise last week, so that's a nice news too. I like to give nice news about countries too.
Thank you.
Not only the bad news. And we're really up to 40 a day now with the murders.
I should add Scott Ainsley, a local wonderful blues musician, also a very good theater composer, came down with us to Salvador to create the score for this piece. It's a wonderful score. And I might say just a word about the relationship between the actors and the puppets, that the story takes place during the First Crusade in Jerusalem. And we made the decision to let the puppets be costumed of that period. And so what did we do with the actors? So we made the decision to costume the actors as if they came from different classes of contemporary Salvadoran society. And by doing that, we created a fiction that we don't talk about in the play, but it's visible, as if 7 people from different classes of Salvadoran society, a maid, a politician, a gang member, a businessman, came together to do something that they don't do, come together and do a play about racial and religious intolerance. And the play begins, you'll see it when we show a little video, it begins with them presenting themselves and ends with them presenting themselves. And one of the strongest reactions that we had was someone in the audience who said, how can you have a maid on stage, and how can you let her manipulate the puppet of the sister of a sultan? And you know, I mean, the class stuff was happening without our having to say a word about it. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, except it was a third crusade.
Thank you.
Maybe Eric, you could delve a little deeper into the play Nathan the Wise and talk about how the religious tolerance themes come to light.
Lessing was perhaps the great spokesman for the German Enlightenment in the late 1700s, and a great friend of Moses Mendelssohn, Jewish.
And Voltaire.
And Voltaire, there you go. Philosophers, writers. You've derailed me. What's interesting about the play, I mean, is that Muslims, Christians, Jews are all represented in the play, as they were, of course, in this place and time. And they were, in this place and time, essentially enemies. And in Nathan the Wise, the actual plot of the play is one in which everyone surprises himself by rescuing his enemy, and then can't deal with the emotions of having done that. I mean, that's basically the structure of this. It's utterly brilliant.
And being rescued by their enemy also.
Yes, yes. You know,
We do a two-person number here.
Yeah. We're bringing out that straw hats and canes any minute.
The soft shoe.
Yeah. So the Templar, for instance, is about to be executed by the Sultan. The Sultan looks at his face and sees in it the face of his own lost brother and spares his life. The Templar then runs out into the world almost deranged from having been spared from being beheaded, sees a fire, rushes into this house on fire, and rescues a young Jewish woman, a Jew, his sworn enemy. That disturbs him even more. So in the Templar alone is this battle of being both rescuer and rescued by his enemies, and basically that's the battlefield of this piece.
And the Jewish girl is Nathan the Wise's daughter, and Nathan is a merchant, and Saladin needs money for his wars, and Nathan has just returned from the Far East with camels loaded with goods, and has a lot of money and doesn't know where to place it, so he becomes Nathan's moneylender. So everybody owes something to somebody, and everybody is owing something.
Eric, when we talked, it struck me that the transformative moments for these people occurred through their actions rather than them receiving polemics or being instructed, but it was through action, and I've just found that an interesting approach. And we also talked about how is tolerance the right word for what happens? Maybe you could ruminate on that a little bit.
You don't know this, but we had a
Enlighten me.
yes, no, we had a colloquio. How do you say colloquio?
Colloquium.
Thank you. In Salvador, after one of the performances, in which we invited the interreligious conference of Salvador, where there's an imam, a couple of evangelists, a Catholic priest, a rabbi, and a Buddhist. And strangely enough, it's the Buddhist that runs it. Not strange at all. Anyway, it's this very ecumenical group, and they came to a performance, and we had a talk over with the audience after the show, and it was interesting that that one of the themes that came out precisely was you were just talking about is tolerance, because the rabbi brought up that he was very offended by this word tolerance, because he said it's not really a play about tolerance, because tolerance means that you're better than the other one whose presence you're tolerating. So we thought that was interesting and really shed light on what we were doing.
Yeah, and I think you know I think here it's kind of a '60s term, and I think that generally speaking, it's no longer well received, as it doesn't say what we mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a word for what you mean?
No.
Engagement.
Solidarity.
Solidarity.
Yeah, excellent. Could you shed some light on what's causing the conditions in El Salvador, and then maybe moving into what it's like to create art in that context?
Well, the main thing is the historical unjust distribution of wealth in Salvador. But let's say that if the United States legalized drugs, that would end the drug cartels, and that would help a lot. But then, of course, and if the arms sales stopped, that would help a lot too. So, I mean, what this is it's since the Cold War era, Central America has been in the eye of the hurricane as a center of war commerce, and which later became drugs. And Salvador is more dangerous now than it was during the war, during the Civil War. And what happened is that the gangs, which you all know about, right? I imagine I don't need.
60,000, over 60,000 gang members in Salvador.
And over 600,000 people depending on the extortions of the gangs. So when people say get rid of the gangs, I mean, you know, there are articles in the papers saying, you know, well, what they did in Honduras, why don't we do that? Which is basically putting 100 gang members in an airplane and then crashing that airplane into a prison where there are another couple of hundred gang members. I mean, this is one of the solutions is proposed. It's incredible. But of course, when you see the jails and the way these jails that are designed for 200 people and have 900 people in them or 2,000 people in them, you just wonder about how do you get out of this? How do you get out of this? I mean, I don't have an answer. But mainly the problem is there is also a very big element in Salvador that does not exist in other countries. It does not exist in Nicaragua or in Costa Rica or in Panama, nor in Guatemala for very different reasons. But this exists in Salvador and Honduras, which is class hatred. There is an exacerbated situation of class hatred in Salvador, which is not logical, actually, that it doesn't exist in other countries. Well, Costa Rica solved the problem years ago in which they simply killed all the local population and then were able to colonize it. And Guatemala is a whole racist problem. It's not a class problem, it's a race problem. With its indigenous population. But Salvador has this extraordinary thing of this really very, very strong class hatred, which can't be taken out of by the root for reasons unknown to anybody.
Well, clearly you put that in your production, an examination of class.
Well, I don't think you can do this otherwise. When I started doing theater in Salvador, one of the directors of the time, this was in the late 60s, called me over when I came in with my cast to the National Theater, and he said, "You're really going to do theater with this bunch of Indians?" Because, you know, before the late 60s, anybody who wanted to step on a stage had to be sort of a little taller and a little blonder and a little whiter.
What was it a hard decision to talk about costuming the actors in various classes, or at what point did that enter the conversation?
Yes, it was a very hard decision because I was against it at the beginning.
Thank you for saying that. No, we fought. And I think part of that is that theater as a vehicle for social change in the United States is in a very different position from theater as a vehicle for social change in Salvador. That what constitutes which aspects of theater constitute social change in these two countries is different. And in the States, theme has a lot to do with it, right? I mean, as well as casting and so forth and so on. But you know, if we're trying to raise money for this production, and a good part of the money that enabled us to do that came, very thankfully, from National Performance Network, Theater Communications Group, Private Family Foundation. So a good part of it was raised here, not all of it, but certainly that got us started on some of the work. And that meant writing grant applications, and that meant being very clear in the grant applications why this project. You know, I mean, we weren't just a bunch of American missionaries going out to do Oklahoma. You know, there was a reason why it was this play with this people in this configuration in that place, and articulating that, I think, also helped us understand what this is the beautiful thing about writing grants, is that sometimes it's as you're writing the grants that you discover what you really want the production to be. It's not, this is a very nice dynamic sometimes. And it was very clear to me that this needed to be a play about Salvador. And it certainly wasn't written about Salvador. You know, so what are the choices? You know, are we going to costume the puppets and give everybody a kind of a contemporary Salvadoran way of speaking, you know, or I think where it led us was to the relationship of the puppeteers and the puppets, which is a natural place to go in puppet theater. And so the way to address this really happened in how we used that relationship to help us create that part of the world which was Salvador, and then Salvador's relationship to doing this classic piece, so that discussion could happen on stage. But it's a different approach than what you first envisioned, and our discussions kind of led us to work that out. And then once we had that, who were these people? What do they actually wear? What is recognizable? And certainly Roberto brought to this conversation a really different perspective than some of the stereotypes that I had about how these costumes are going to be read in the context of the Salvadoran audience.
And there's another element I think that is important to point out, is that in the translation, because Eric, also on the text, Eric did a translation in verse in a sort of an 18th century English, also using inverted terms that we don't use anymore, and a very.
I used a translation. I adapted one. Yeah.
But you adapted it, yes.
Yeah.
And working on this translation, which I did into Spanish in verse also, I tried to use as many terms possible as were terms that would ring a bell in a Salvadoran ear today, which is like, you know, there's been a truce between the government and the gangs. So what Saladin has with the Templars is a truce. It's not a stopping of war like Lessing says in German, which I don't speak. And so all these terms that all of a sudden brought the play back to life, or brought the play to today in Salvador. Like at one point, the Sultan's emissary asks Nathan, "Where is the money?" And we said, "Where are the bags?" And this in Salvador is immediately recognized because our ex-president is in, how do you say when you're in jail in your own home? In house arrest because of having stolen money that came from Taiwan, and it's called the bag issue because it's money bags, right? So all this is very important to me anyway, and to us generally, is to have the play resonate in the ear of the spectator who's watching it today, which is something that I'm always blessed with because I'm always working in translations. So translation allows that.
Do you feel that, maybe it's too early to tell, do you feel that it's making a difference, or how will the play make a difference?
No, I really don't think theater makes a difference in the world. I really don't. I think we can make people more sensitive, but I don't really think. I think that, I'm going to be 70 this year, so I stopped thinking that we can change the world with theater.
Yeah. I mean,
But we can contribute to it.
There have been some nice repercussions. We got one of the nicest reviews that came out. Inez and I were still down there on the first weekend that the show opened for its initial three-week run. And so we got to see some of those first reviews. And one of the ones that Roberto showed us came not from a theater critic, but from a political columnist, a leftist political columnist, who said, in this place of such violence, this production is a breath of fresh air. Did I get that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And he's a rightist columnist.
Okay. Even better. Okay. So comments like that, comments about the having the maid on stage as a manipulator of a royal figure. I mean, what can you do? You can create some kind of, you can throw a pebble in the stream and
You can do little shock waves.
hope that there's shock waves. There you are, We have a 10-minute.
I was going to say this might be a good time.
Is this a good time? Can we run that? Yeah. Somebody turning that on? This will give you, it's just excerpts, and just give you an idea of the staging and how this feels. It's a cast of 7. It starts in dark times.
Okay, sorry about that. It's gonna start. Live theater. Yeah. All right, sorry. Need to restart the computer.
So let's take another question.
Michelle?
Roberto, what was your initial reticence to have the costumes in a way that you finally agreed to do? What was your initial reticence to it?
Well, it's not a coincidence that Eric has talked a lot about the maid, because that was the one that was clear. The others weren't clear because I really don't know what a gang member looks like today. I mean, I live that every day when I'm going home in my car and wondering, gee, I wonder if that's a gang member on the corner there. And I wonder if that person coming towards my car is going to pull out a gun.
Can I tell a little story about that?
Yeah. And just for 1 second. To me, it was difficult to have some clear iconography as to how to dress them. It's one of the most difficult shows I've had to dress because of that.
We were on the beach one day. We had a day off, and we went to this beautiful beach. And one of Roberto's friends on the beach was standing and talking. A group of people. Nada was there. For anyone who hasn't met Natan el Sabio, Roberto's wife, and she also plays Nathan in the show. You'll see her on the screen momentarily. And we're standing there, and 5 young men pass us on the beach.
In swimsuits.
In swimsuits. And your neighbor says, he says, you know, there was a time, I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly, there was a time you saw 5 young men passing on the beach. There were 5 young men passing on the beach. And now you immediately think, am I about to get robbed? Is this a gang? You know? So, are we ready? No.
I don't know if I answered your question, Michelle.
What's that?
I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I think you did, yeah. I thought maybe you were thinking in terms of defining an aesthetic approach that was flexible and broad enough so that you would not be too specific in your delineation of meaning, so that there would be echoes and reverberations.
Yeah, but it's very difficult. It's extremely difficult, and I always try to keep away from you know, in this kind of production also, you just don't, you know what you don't want. You don't want the Chinese slippers with the black leotards.
Yeah.
You know, because this is
Well, I thought maybe it was in fact the reason. Yeah.
But and then of course we were limited to taking 7 actors because we want to travel with the play, and anything over 7. I mean, 7 is already a very big group to move around, but anything over 7 is just completely out of the question. So there's also the fact that the one who plays the maid as a character also plays the princess. So how do you change costumes? Do you not? How do you deal with that?
And I think what was very important to me is that she not change costumes, because, well, you'll see here, the puppeteers are playing puppets who have some connection to them in terms of character, but they don't become a character. I mean, one of the things that we're doing here is, and I did this in the adaptation. This was the way the adaptation was formulated, and one of the dramatic things that Roberto and I then had to figure out, did it work, and if so, how does it work? That in the relationship between actors and puppets, we essentially have 2 different worlds. So even when they talk to each other, they're not in the same world. And so what defines this? And so, you know, and why are some puppets and others not? And so essentially what we did was we took the 5 characters who are in some way what we'd consider the family. The people who represent the characters in this play who are interconnected. There are other characters in this play who further the plot, but who are not interconnected. And so for me, dramaturgically, they actually don't need to be characters. They are forces that act on this central grouping of characters. And I think you'll see that really clearly in some of the scenes. Jen, can we go?
And one of what? Oh, I'm sorry. No. One of the things that I find amusing in this experience is the fact that you have to sort of, the actor has to become neutral in order to be able to go through the puppet, but a neutral that is not an effacement of what you are. And of course, this is incredibly difficult in Central America and Mexico, where the tendency to melodrama is extremely strong, and we are all very melodramatic, and so we had a very hard time doing that.
que nadie sabe de dónde. Se fue, nadie sabe a dónde. Cuando de entre las llamas se planta de pronto ante nosotros, llevándola en lo alto con su fuerte brazo. Frío e insensible ante los gritos de júbilo de nuestra gratitud.
Tuvo que cruzar el Éufrates, el Tigris, el Jordán. ¿Cómo vamos a alegrarnos y alabar al buen Dios que lo trasladó a usted y a sus naves sobre las alas de su ángel invisible? El Dios que dio la señal a mi ángel para que visiblemente me llevara a través del fuego.
No es más que un rumor.
Donde se guardan inmensas cantidades de oro, con las que el prudente padre de Saladino cubre los costos de la guerra y paga a sus ejércitos. El patriarca también sabe que de cuando en cuando va allí Saladino por caminos apartados y casi sin escolta.
¡Jaque! La verdad, no lo había visto. Por este movimiento sacrifiqué a mi reina.
¿Jugaste? Bueno, ahora me toca a mí. Jaque. Ah.
No fui yo el primero en desenvainar. Hubiera preferido prolongar la tregua, llegar a un acuerdo con nuestros enemigos y de paso proporcionarle a mi querida hermana Cita un matrimonio digno de su rango, con el propio hermano de Ricardo.
¿Tendrías la bondad de enviarle tu capa a mi hija? ¿Ah?
Por cuya mano su Dios, el Dios por quien guerrea, quiera regresarte de nuevo a la tierra para la que naciste.
¿Su Dios por quien guerrea? ¿Es propiedad de alguien, Dios?
¿Cuánta razón tenía Natan al decir? Conócela y verás.
¿Quién ha dicho eso?
Su padre. Él me dijo, conócela y verás. Por cierto, ¿dónde está él? ¿Aún con Saladino? Debo ir. Presiento un peligro.
¿Peligro de qué?
Un peligro para usted. Para mí.
¿Cuál fe es la que te ha iluminado más?
Sultán, si soy judío.
Y yo musulmán, y el cristiano está entre nosotros. De estas tres religiones, solo una puede ser la verdadera. Hazme partícipe de tu entendimiento.
¿En qué estoy metido? ¿Qué querrá de mí el sultán? Esperaba que me pidiera dinero y resulta que quiere la verdad. ¡La verdad! Y la quiere contante y sonante. Lo que sigue se deduce de lo anterior. Apenas muerto el padre, viene cada uno con el anillo y quiere ser el príncipe de la casa. Se investiga, se disputa, se demanda. Inútil, imposible demostrar cuál es el verdadero anillo. Casi tan imposible como resulta demostrar cuál es la fe verdadera.
Esta es tu respuesta a la pregunta que te hice.
Espere. Yo tengo un ruego para usted.
Habla.
Llego de un largo viaje en el que cobré antiguas deudas.
Claro que podría haber sido mi padre. Quizás sea yo un hijo del arroyo. Exonérame de mi pedigrí y ahórrate el tuyo. Aunque bien sabemos que podríamos documentar tu árbol genealógico paso a paso hasta llegar a Abraham.
¿Merezco yo tanta amargura? Caballero, ¿acaso le he usado algo hasta ahora?
Perdón,
No importa. ¡Vamos! ¡Deprisa!
Caballero, caballero, un doble secreto. Uno solo lo conozco yo, el otro lo conoce usted.
¡Comienza!
No, señor caballero, usted primero. No le quepa duda, caballero, que mi secreto no podría servirle de nada, como antes no conozca yo el suyo. Si empiezo yo primero, usted no me habrá confiado nada, y mi secreto seguirá siendo mi secreto, y usted perderá el suyo. Pero basta, confiese que la ama hasta la locura.
Un templario amar a una judía, ¿cómo puedes?
Tiene razón, suena absurdo, pero de cuando en cuando hay en un asunto más de lo que sospechamos. Esta es la tierra de los milagros.
Habría que ejecutar al judío. Es el castigo que establecen el derecho papal y el imperial para tal crimen, para tal depravación.
De modo que...
Y por cierto, la misma ley manda a la hoguera a una muchacha judía que seduce a un cristiano, a morir por el fuego.
Veo y me encuentro a una joven maravillosa. Imbécil que soy. Me lanzo nuevamente a las llamas. Intento conquistarla. Soy rechazado. El prudente padre no me desestima directamente. Indaga. Pide informes.
¿Querrá acaso obligarte a que te conviertas al judaísmo?
¿Quién sabe?
Lo sabe. ¿Quién mejor conoce a Natan?
La superstición en la que hemos sido criados no pierde su poder sobre nosotros. No son libres todos los que se ríen de sus cadenas, sultán. Y si resultara que ese parangón fuera uno de estos judíos que busca niños cristianos para educarlos en su fe.
¿Quién dice eso sobre él?
Ella es una niña cristiana raptada.
En eso descabalgaste, me entregaste la criatura envuelta en tu capa. La llevé a mi pecho, la besé, me eché de rodillas y sollocé. ¡Dios mío! De 7 vuelvo a tener una.
Natan, eres un cristiano. Jamás hubo mejor cristiano que tú.
¡El cielo nos proteja! Lo que me hace cristiano a tus ojos, te hace judío a los míos.
Sets, costumes, and puppets were by Ines Zellerbas.
The help of Ghana.
With the help of Yana.
And music, a big part of
Music, Scott Ainsley, yeah.
So where is this headed next?
Well, we're going on tour to Honduras in October, and we're trying to get a tour organized in the States, mainly among Latino communities. Right now we're working on the New York and the Washington area. But the idea is not to bring only this play, but to bring this play along with 4 other Salvadoran playwrights' productions. But it involves 20 people, so it's a dream.
A lot of cats to herd. Is there any concern that some of the particularly Salvadorian elements, particularly the costumes, might be lost on audiences that don't know about this? And how will you give that context to people?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it'll be lost on a Latino audience.
Okay. Questions from people? Anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Since Eric put so much work into the English translation, is there a chance to see it in English as well?
No. No, I mean, this production it belongs to Teatro Luis Poma.
Who else?
Well, what a good idea.
Yeah, but you know, the reason why I was asking is because Lessing is not really a known component in the US.
Completely unknown.
Yeah, and I always loved his work. That's why I thought it would be very nice to get a chance.
F. Murray Abraham's doing it at CSC in New York this season. This Foundation wise.
Really?
Yeah.
But I have to say that one of our challenges in staging this was, I think the play as written for a contemporary audience has to deal with an embarrassing melodramatic ending. And that, you know, all of a sudden everybody's related. Oh, God, that's so nice, you know? And so I think the puppets helped us deal with that because we could figure out how to make it playful without losing the truth of it, right? That, I mean, doing a play with a message and telling everybody it's a message, I mean, this is really kind of embarrassing.
And recognition scenes just bring forth laughter. Now, when in the 19th century, people would actually faint in the audience because it was such a standard thing to the lost child.
I could still add something, being one of the inside, as we can see from the picture, is Nathan here. What I really felt was very interesting for us is that the philosophy of the play was for us to use as the philosophy of the team playing it. Because with the technique of I say Sandglass theater, or what they offered us, we really had to put away all our differences and all our different way of being, of acting, or anything, to be able to create together life to the puppet. Because as in the play we speak about 3 monotheist religions, but when we are 3 to give life to one being, like the character of the puppet, we have really to breathe together to be one, and that was really interesting. We had to work a lot on ourselves, and I guess everybody who works in this kind of technique has to. Even more than when you build a play, what you generally have to try to understand each other, but there it was so much stronger to give life to one of the character between 3 so different persons, you know, when you have to be part of the body. And so I thought really it was interesting to have this philosophy of the play in the team with giving life to the play.
In the staging, I think, just to expand on that, I think that the staging by necessity creates a non-hierarchical society. right? So Nada is Nathan. You know, she gets to do the F. Murray Abraham moment. You know, and you know, and then the next moment she's on the feet of a puppet, and you know, a character playing you know dressed as a high-level politician. You know, comes out and commands the stage with his character one moment. The next moment he's on the feet of a puppet, and it's fluidly changing from one to another, and everyone. I mean, metaphorically, as well as physically, everybody's willing to take the feet of somebody else, you know. I mean, I mean, I think that from the puppet perspective, that is the ultimate non-hierarchical society, you know. How can I help you walk? So, I mean, that's what happens.
Yeah, it was very strong, I thought.
Yeah.
Could you guys talk about your long relationship together, how much work you've done, how you know each other, and sort of leading up to where we started today?
Well, I first saw Sandglass when they performed in Geneva, Switzerland, and I was very taken by it. I don't know if it was Invitation to Heaven or Sand. I can never remember that. To me, the place is mixed. And I was very impressed by the work, and then I think Eric was at the time looking for somebody to direct him in sort of a very crazy project that he had with improvisations, with puppets. And so we tried that, and we performed that a couple of times.
And that one failed miserably, but it led to better things.
Right, and it was a horrible show. because you can't really improvise with puppets. You can't. I mean, you have to have you can, but you have to make them as you go along, right? Of course you can, but not the way we had set out to do. So this led to something else, which was a fantastic project, which was One Way Street, an evocation of Walter Benjamin, which to me is one of the most beautiful shows I've ever done. And it was not only a fantastic, life-changing experience for me, discovering Walter Benjamin and Hannah Arendt and Gershom Scholem, and their writings and what this means in the world today. And that was a beautiful show which had a great career. With Enos's Legs starring in a memorable place in the show.
I mean, I think that can thank the Salvadoran Civil War for having met Roberto and Nara, because you were basically in exile for 12 years in Geneva. I mean,
25 years.
25 years. Mm-hmm. There, so.
So thank you, Ronald Reagan.
That's not something we've heard a lot during this festival.
I was being ironic.
Any other?
It was totally ironic. Please, I'd like to put that out on record.
That's fine. Can you talk about some of the evidences of the violence that you saw while you were down there creating, and how that made you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the several of them that impacted us pretty close were. We were actually coming back from dinner one night, and Roberto got a call from one of his good friends to ask if we were all right. And we didn't know why he was asking that, and someone had thrown a grenade into a hotel in the neighborhood. We were down there when the gangs gave an ultimatum that there was going to be a curfew, and we were in the middle of rehearsal, and all of a sudden, we're in there, we're rehearsing, and all of a sudden all the actors just stop, and they're all looking, and Roberto looks up and says, "What's going on?" I said, "It's after time. We need to get home before the gang curfew." And Roberto says, "Oh, right. Pack up quick. We're gone. Got to get home." And then there was
we lost one of the finest members of the first workshop who was going to be in the play, because half the time he couldn't make it to the workshop because he lives in a gang infested area where he has to ask permission to leave the neighborhood. And you know, they said no that day, and the next day they said no, and you know, just call and say, I can't come in, you know. There are things that are bigger than the theater. Even if the show must go on. Sometimes it can't.
And what was that like creating in that context? And
I thought it was inspiring. I thought it was really interesting and great.
That's Ines over there on the camera. I don't know, Roberto, it was, yeah?
Louder.
What?
Ines needs to be louder.
Oh.
Ines needs to be louder.
It was inspiring. Because it put everybody into a different focus. You really focused in a different way. Because your subconscious constantly was dealing with something that you tried to push in the background but keep on working. But you couldn't fully get rid of it. For me, it was very exciting.
Wow. I always find it a terrible thought to think that great art has always been produced under times of great censorship. But, you know, great art does get born around very difficult situations.
I mean, I think I guess I would just say we were very aware that that every day we would wake up and look at the news to see how many people had been killed that day and who they were. And you know, one day it was a doctor, not a gang member, and so we would have to say, why a doctor? And turned out that someplace there was some connection to the gangs. You know, and one day it was a bunch of kids playing soccer, and we had to say, why this? But you know, there's always this question of why is it those people? You know, what's the connection? Is it random? Is this accident? You know, is this totally random and anybody could go out at any time, or are there actually reasons for targets? And that question, I think, was always with us, so that we could just try and understand where we stood. Do you agree with that?
And the great tragedy of Salvador is that, you know, there was such an exodus of people during the war and after the war, and now it's a country that is killing its youth. Because as one editorialist who I despise said, but I think it was very clear, so I'll quote him, he said, in Salvador, even death has class consciousness. Because it's basically, it's poor young men who are getting killed. That's the overwhelming majority.
We have a question here.
And I'm hearing that in some ways it is the randomness that Eric was talking about, that even if it isn't random, the perception is that it's random because you're not on the inside. You can't possibly know why somebody was targeted, and so it feels random. I think under those circumstances, sometimes petty differences disappear and people work together as a team because they're in the same boat, and it feels like that. Anybody, because of the randomness, could not be able to make the next rehearsal. You just don't know.
But just a question, is it random if a couple of gang members show up at your doorstep and say, we have singled out your house as a gang house and you have to leave by tonight or we'll kill you?
No, that's not random.
But their choice, right, it can be random.
Can be random.
Right, exactly.
And so from your point of view, if you don't know that there's a definitive reason behind your being chosen, it feels random.
Right, exactly. Yes.
So that, but the people in the company, you know, that Inez is talking. I mean, I would think if you were working together on something, that whatever petty differences might have bothered you if you had been someplace else where that wasn't happening, would just fall away. I mean, you can't afford that. That's a waste of effort.
Well, I think sadly, the petty differences are still very present in the political world of Salvador. And Roberto has said to me that if the right and the left would stop arguing, would stop fighting each other, somebody might actually come up with a plan for the country. So.
But not within the theater troupe, that's what I meant.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the country, that can't happen, obviously. But within the troupe, we become a team.
One more question I think we have time for? Yes, over here.
You've talked about class as being the big dividing or splitting society up. What about gender?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer because the feminists in Salvador all talk about a patriarchal society. And yet, this is a society in which there are almost no fathers. The fathers are very absent. It's a society that is primarily led by women. They are the breadwinners. They are, I mean, there are, I don't know what the percentage of mothers who are the head of households without fathers is, but it's enormous. And this is something inherited from the colonies and the conquest, so in very many on site, you would think it's almost a matriarchal society, but it isn't. And gender equality, of course, there is not, but there is much. Politically, much more than in the States. I mean, all the countries in Latin America that have had women presidents, they don't know what the big Hillary thing is about anyway. I mean, there's so many countries that have already had women presidents. Salvador is not a case in point because we have not. But in the work field, are women paid less than men? Yes. I mean, I think it's the inequalities are still there, and there's in the past 3 or 4 years, there's several laws that have been passed to protect. Well, in the past 20 years, there's been a lot of laws protecting women and children. Like, for instance, there's a law that if a woman can prove her husband, the father of her children's alcoholism, she can actually cash in his paycheck. And then there's the compulsory protection for children, in which a father who does not, even a father who has not recognized his children and whose paternity is proved, the mother can have his salary taken from his paycheck before he gets his paycheck, and these sort of things. There's an anti-feminicidio. How do you say that? Murder of women. What do you call that in English?
Misogyny, maybe. Misogyny, perhaps.
I don't know the term. It's called feminicidio in Spanish. It's the killing of women, the murder of women.
Matricide.
Sounds like mothers to me. There's a law against it that has been passed now. It's difficult application, but there are. I mean, institutionally there are things moving, but there is no equality.
There is still a lot of derecho de pierna.
I don't know how you say it.
Right.
I know how you say it in French. I don't know how you say it
The
in English.
men thinking they can rape any women, they have the right to have imposed sexual relation just because they are a male and she's a female.
We're out of time, and I want to thank Eric and Roberto and all of you. Thank you for being here.